And I don't really drink it. So I turned to Rachel, who
I
does
do.
enjoy drinking Bordeaux. Or look, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like Rachel, may perhaps like tell the audience like why Bordeaux is special to you as an introduction and what Bordeaux
Yeah,
is all about.
I think when I was sort of first becoming a sommelier, I worked with the people I was working with at the time were all very into classical wine. So it was like very nice that I got like very like early exposure to these like really classic wine regions. And I don't think that's true for, it's not true for everybody. It's like, there are people, you did your interview with Jabby the other day, who's doing like the Grape Witches scholarship. And it's like, there's all kinds of ways to come up in the wine industry. But the way I kind of came up was through these like very classic regions. And Bordeaux, I think like Bordeaux really struck a nerve with like the nerd in me.
Yep.
Like the fantasy novel, history loving, Age of Empires playing like young nerd Rachel, because there's just so much history. Like you can't talk about Bordeaux and you can't talk about this wine region and not talk about the entire history of like ancient wine and also the entire history of modern wine. And by proxy also, it's sort of known to be one of the wines that just ages the best. And there's many reasons for that, obviously. I know last week, if anyone was here doing the Burgundy talk, we talked a little bit about ageability in wine and kind of like what makes wine age. But in order for a wine to age, it basically needs to be built like, like a brick house. Like it needs to be like meat on the bones. And so I think when we start drinking these wines, we'll see, we have like a variety of vintages here, and we'll kind of see how some of these wines progress, and also just like where they could possibly go. Because some of these wines, I think that we have tonight could easily age for another 30, 40 years.
We all have that long. I mean, these wines will outlive me 112%.
Oh yeah, wine 4 is going to outlive us all. Like wine 4 is like in it to win it. But I think there's something, and we talked about this the other day, Nick, when we were opening these and pouring these. I'm very romantic in the sense of like I like to like really think about the nature of time and the universe. But when I'm drinking a Bordeaux, especially an older Bordeaux, it really acts as like this time capsule for me, where it's like, oh, where was I in 2009? Oh, where was I in 2015? And then it's like you get even farther back from that and you're like, wow, this wine was made before I was even born. This wine was made by people who have already passed away. This wine, there's so many things you can think about and so many things you can experience in Bordeaux that are aside even from just the wine itself, which is, I think, why it's sort of captured the imagination of so many collectors, because people want to own, very rich people want to own a piece of history, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe not drink it. They won't drink it, but they'll at least put it in their cellar with the other thousands of bottles that they have.
It's the same people who like buy, a piece of the Berlin Wall off of auction and then like put it in a glass case, in their wine cellar. You want that piece. You want to be able to touch that thing that was made at a time,
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's
and and you really can't. The other thing is you really can't sort of underestimate the effect Bordeaux has had on other important wine regions around the world. Yes. A classic example is Rioja. Like Rioja, classically famous for using American oak on their red wines, and that wouldn't have happened unless they had this rivalry with Bordeaux and they decided that they weren't going to use French oak for their wines to age their wines in, they were going to use American. And so this whole style and this whole history of Rioja sort of came about because of Bordeaux's influence. English obviously love Bordeaux and they love drinking it. They call it, well, in their
Claret.
style, which is called claret. And, you know, so I don't think we can sort of overemphasize the importance of Bordeaux. The reality is,
yeah. Oh no, I was going to say, I would say Bordeaux is the story of modern wine history. Like we wouldn't have many of the wines that we sell or many of the wines that we talk about or many of the wines that make us money in the wine shop, you know, the California cabs and all this without Bordeaux. Bordeaux really like
exactly. In our capitalist society, Bordeaux represents the most probably the original capitalist institution in the wine world. And we get, obviously, Napa, we get even like emerging markets like China are all modeled around Bordeaux, to Bordeaux's detriment, obviously. But I mean, this is one half of the equation. The other half of this real strange dichotomy is that no one drinks Bordeaux. No, it's never on any must-have wine list. It's never on, you know, it's never the wine that like you as a somm and a wine professional, when you're writing a wine list or you're writing something, you don't think, okay, I obviously need to have a Bordeaux on the list because that's what everyone asks for. Nobody asks for Bordeaux, and I don't. At
our level for sure. Like I think there's probably places like Michelin star restaurants in the world where, you know, it's like they have to have a few because there's going to be some millionaire who comes in and it's like, where's your blank? You know, where's your, you know, Leoville Lake Cass or whatever. But yeah, definitely at the sort of like level that we're at, I don't think it's a thing.
And I would also say that this level that we're at is this grassroots level, and like wine regions can't struggle to survive when they don't engage in a grassroots entry level kind of.
Well, I think, I mean, I don't know if the people, like if everybody watching or not, like knows or not, but a lot of Bordeaux is sold in advance. It's bought in futures. So unless, you know, the sommelier is going out and being like, okay, like what was the 2020 vintage like? Was it good? Was it bad? Was it hot? Which commune was the best? Was it Margaux? Was it Saint Estèphe? A lot of those really prestigious wines, or a lot of those wines that you'd want to get, are bought already, like before they even are in the bottle. And also, you know, young Bordeaux is really bad. Like, no one wants it. So if you're running like a bistro style restaurant, how are you supposed to, like, you're not gonna sit on, you know, 8 cases of Bordeaux for 10 years and be like, oh, finally it's good. Like, you gotta make some money. Yeah, it doesn't work.
That said, we might as well start tasting some wine because that's what we're here to do.
Yeah, I could talk to her. Maybe everyone who's come into wine, like come to pick up wine, knows that I can talk forever. I'm like, hi, how are you? What's your day like?
I don't have the bottles in front of me, so unfortunately I can't show the bottle, but I think
I have them. I remember I kept them so that you didn't have to take them home.
So why don't, as the expert between us, why don't you tell me about this wine?
Oh, I will. I'd be happy to. All right, well, this is Le Fond Rocher. This one is a 4th growth. So for those who don't, or who aren't familiar.
I don't know what that means. Okay, I'm going to be the audience.
Well, let me tell you. In 1855, you know, a bunch of old dudes got together and were like, these are all the best chateaus in Bordeaux. And they ranked them from 1 to 5. Why they call them growths?
Thanks, really Napoleon. That's all I'm going to say.
That's, probably something to do with Napoleon. And then, so, you know, your first growth has just 5 chateaus in it. Your second growth has, I think, 12, third growth, 14, fourth growth is 10, anyway, so on and so forth. But there's, you know, a limited amount of chateaus. Never once have they updated or upgraded any chateaus except for one time in 1976, 2006, I want to say. Anyway, they upgraded a second to a third, but it was a highly political move. Both of the chateaus were owned by the Rothschild family. I know, shocking, right? Rothschilds, big money. They moved it up. So this is Chateau Lafont Rocher. This is,
love the color of the label.
yeah, it's classic. This is a fourth growth. Fourth growth meaning it's sort of the fourth class of growths. But this one is mostly Cabernet Sauvignon. I did I made a little tech sheet for each of them just so I knew like the breakdown of the grapes before we started. So this one, 58 Cabernet Sauvignon, 35 Merlot, 6 Cabernet Franc, and 4 Petit Verdot, which are some of the legal grapes in Bordeaux. And this is, so we're only drinking wines from the left bank. Bordeaux itself is like cut into a river, or sorry, cut in two by a river. And on the left bank, they like to grow mostly Cabernet Sauvignon because Cabernet Sauvignon likes to, gravel soils, and there's lots of gravel over there. And then on the right bank, they grow mostly Merlot. So most of the wines that we're going to have tonight are Cabernet Sauvignon heavy, and that's really what Bordeaux does best is Cabernet Sauvignon. Big, bold, meaty wines that are meant to age. But yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. You said there were 4 grapes in this. Cab, Merlot, Petit Verdot, and
Cabernet Franc.
Franc. What could be useful is that maybe we could discuss like what each of those grapes why they exist in Bordeaux, and like what flavors do they exist in, what they bring to the glass. I mean, the one I know is Petit Verdot because it's grown a lot in Australia, and I actually like this wine as a single varietal. Brings color, brings a little bit of florality to the wine. It's a very purple grape. We don't see it often, especially in Canada as a single varietal. You see some maybe 1 or 2 Australian ones, but that's my grape.
Because there's so much vintage variation in Bordeaux, like even I know like a lot of people, maybe if they follow wine stuff on Instagram, saw like all those photos of Burgundy with the candles lit in the vineyards because there's some really bad frosts this year. But Bordeaux also has like very, very, very bad vintages, and it rains a lot, which means that the grapes don't always produce a lot of grapes, or the vines. So basically they always blend. Because each grape ripens at a different time. So every grape sort of allows them to make more wine if something goes wrong. And not so much these days because, technology and climate change, but back in the day, a lot of stuff went wrong basically all the time, which is where you get this idea of vintages really plays like heavily into like most of France, like if you're going to be real, like Champagne, Burgundy, Bordeaux. But, Bordeaux has great vintages, but there's really hasn't been that many bad vintages in a long time. I think like the last one where they're like, don't drink it, like throw it in the toilet, it's horrible, was like 1991. So, I was just a wee baby.
Time ago. Yeah. This is a great one.
Yeah. I think so. Saint Estèphe is the most north of all the communes, and it also grows on the left bank the highest proportion of Merlot, which is why this one has a little bit more Merlot in it. So even though the tannins are like very intense in this wine, I think it still has like a softness in the back because Merlot brings Cabernet Sauvignon is like, I mean, I don't know if you agree, Nick, but it's like, it can be like a little like rock'em sock'em, like in the mouth. It's an aggressive grape. So yeah, Merlot, they usually put Merlot in just to be like, hey, like, why don't you just chill out a little bit, mellow down, like
a little plusher, a little bit more fruit.
Yeah. And I think Petit Verdot, I know it brings like a concentration as well as like some of the tannin structure, but I think this is the only one we have with a little bit of Petit Verdot in it. I think, so this wine is a 2015. 2015 was like a very, very hot year. So I think it's actually drinking really well, but having tried all the wines, like I'd be interested to see like what you guys think in the chat, but I think this wine is very, it's still a little aggressive.
Yeah, it's young. It's very chewy. And if we talk about like, what I classically, use the spring analogy, like it is tight. There is lots of flavor there. And I mean, it's still 6 years old. You can start to get that herbal quality. You can start to get that roasted meat quality coming out. The fruit is like, very, very smooth. For me, it's always this graphite thing. So like, when we blind tasting, we talk about markers and like things that help you, flavors and aromas that help you identify a region or a wine. For me, Bordeaux is always about this pencil case kind of graphite wood shaving thing. And like, it brings me so much joy, that aroma, because it has this like childhood memory, nostalgic kind of thing.
I also like love that flavor. And I get that from Bordeaux. I get that from Beaujolais. Like there's like certain wines that throw that like pencil shaving flavor for me. And you're right, it's like a nostalgia thing. I think with Bordeaux, there's so much going on in the glass that there's like, it can't help not remind you of something. And it's like, again, like I get very romantic about Bordeaux. I'm just like, oh, the stories, the romance, memories, but like there is like visceral memory. Like Bordeaux just is like a very visceral wine, and it brings back, yeah, just like a lot of those like very, like intense like feelings when you drink it.
So this one we bought this from the LCBO. It's available in vintages. I think it's like $96, $96.05 or something. There was a lot of it. So, if this is something that's kind of interests you and like you like this kind of style, there is an argument to be said for like that wine to be a little bit more New World in its youth, to maybe appeal to people who like a more Californian, more intense, more older Cabernet. So like, even if, as connoisseurs, we say that this is a bit young, I would also say that, you could pour that for a Cali Cab drinker and they'd be like, yeah, this is great. It's like power and texture and like intensity.
100%.
So like, you don't have to necessarily discount. I mean, obviously it's not knowing what the potential, and like absolutely having tasted delicious Bordeaux, I know that this is an unripe version of it in its youth. But it's still, there is still way, like it does still have its sellability and its like drinkability.
Yes. I think that's like one of the biggest misconceptions is people get like afraid to drink Bordeaux. They're like, well, when should I drink it? When should I drink it? And it's like, you can drink it anytime you want. It's same as, like a lot of like the, great wine regions of France, you get the same question with Burgundy. People are like, well, when? And it's like, I can give you a ballpark of when it might be drinking like well, but also you have to like old wine. Some people don't like the taste of old wine. If you don't like the taste of old wine, then this wine is for you. It brings the power, it brings the punch, brings the elegance, but yeah, I really like this wine. I think, of ageability, this could probably go quite some time.
I'd also say that this is more delicious. Number one, is more delicious than a Burgundy in its youth, which is a little jagged and not undrinkable, but like there is no pleasure, there is no like elegance. It's just a rough jigsaw that hasn't been put together yet. But this definitely is capable of much more, but it's still super delicious and very smooth and very elegant. Lots of flavor, lots of complexity. not mad at it. But then again, it is still 6 years old, which is strange in the context of wine. A 6-year-old Burgundy would be drinking a little nicer than this anyway.
I mean, yeah, Bordeaux is built to last. Cabernet Sauvignon, in all its myriad of forms, you know, you can buy it for $10, you can buy it for $10,000. I always say, but you can, like, this grape is so versatile, but when it's made well and it's like made really well, you know, like this is it. This is well-made Cabernet Sauvignon. When people don't say they don't like Cabernet Sauvignon, I'm like, but have you tried Bordeaux? Should we try the second wine? I feel like
so with wine number one, we're in Saint Estèphe. Where are we with this one? The 14
we are in, so actually like the total opposite. So the next wine is Les Fifs de la Grange from Saint Julien. So Saint Julien is actually the order it goes: Saint Estèphe, Pauillac, Saint Julien. There's like two weird little AOPs in between that don't have any growths whatsoever. And then there's Margaux. And Margaux is, I mean, by far, obviously the most well-known of all the Bordeaux appellations. You know, Jing and I were laughing because on Bling Empire, did you watch Bling Empire? No? Oh man, guys, watch Bling Empire. It's like a reality TV show and about like super rich people in LA. She like wants to name her daughter Margot, and she's like, not after Margot Robbie, after Chateau Margaux. I was like, that's amazing. But it's yeah, I mean, Margot's the most famous, but Saint Julien is probably the one that gets the least love, I would say. It's the smallest. They don't have any first growths. I don't think they even have, no, they do have second growths, but it's got the shallowest of the gravel outcrops. So it makes sort of the most fruit heavy wine and the least mineral wine, which I think this is actually a pretty good example of. This is also a second label. So basically Bordeaux houses, because their first labels are so expensive, they take all the best fruit, or, you know, like the best of the best of the best. Same with Champagne, like all of these like prestigious regions kind of do the same thing. They say they don't, but they do, you know. So they take the best of the fruit and they put it into the best wine, and then they take the second best fruit and they make like a second best wine out of it, and then they take the third best fruit and then they make the third best wine out of it. So they all have you know, they all release like 3, 4, 5 wines, and this is the second label of Chateau Lagrange. So it's Les Fifs de Lagrange. And
Lagrange is, and what growth is Chateau Lagrange?
Lagrange is cheat sheet, third growth.
Right. I don't know.
Saint Julien, that's right. Saint Julien has a lot of third growths, but this one's
so this is the second one of, you know, a relatively absolutely top 15
houses,
chateaus, winemakers in Bordeaux.
Yeah, so
it's not a wine to like turn your nose up.
No. Where Chateau Lagrange probably goes for about $400 or $500 out the gate, this wine, I think
120, about 120.
Yeah.
Oh. This is also like so aromatic, like so floral, like this dark potpourri, incense, musk kind of thing going on.
This one is 52 Cabernet Sauvignon, 41 Merlot. So there's lots of Merlot in this, and 7 Petit Verdot. I find the proportion of Merlot has been going up in Bordeaux in the last like 10, 15 years. I think it's just, it ripens. So like Merlot ripens much quicker than Cabernet Sauvignon. And I think in sort of an effort to be more accessible, they've started putting more Merlot into their wines just to soften them out a little bit younger, especially in the second labels. Like the second labels will get a little bit more Merlot to make them drinkable younger, as opposed to the first labels, which are really meant to, you know,
never be drunk. traded as a
Yeah,
commodity
which I
around.
think in Bordeaux, they just assume that the first labels are going to be, like sitting in some cellar somewhere, like doing nothing, which is a shame because all wine is meant to be drank,
Yeah.
I really like this.
Yeah, it's a really nice wine. It just like it has a little bit more drinkability. I think obviously the Merlot, just so delicious. Um, how did you, and this is something I've never been able to really reconcile, but how did you in your studies reconcile the Burgundian model where it was the grounds and the vineyard that was the most sacred part of the wine to a Bordeaux model where it's the producer that is the most sacred part of the most special part of that region? Like,
When you kind
did
of
you ever
look at
have to like figure that out?
yeah, it's funny because like I mean in Burgundy basically they over hundreds of years the monks would like look at the sun and be like, oh, like it stops here on the hill and the grapes are better on this side, so if we put a wall there and call this one the better one, like it was so meticulously done over like centuries. Whereas like in Burgundy, especially where we're drinking wines right now from the Médoc, the Dutch came, they drained the marshland, a bunch of chateaus moved in and were like, okay, let's rock and roll, and just started like making tons of wine. But if you look where the chateaus are located, if you look at Saint Estèphe, Saint Julien, Pauillac especially, and Margaux, you'll see that in those four appellations, the gravel, like they're basically like these. The Dutch came, they drained these, this marshland, and then when they drained it, they found these almost like these like craters, like these like concave croups filled with gravel. And the spots where the gravel is the deepest are the spots where Cabernet Sauvignon performs the best. So appellations where you have like the highest percentage of Cabernet Sauvignon are considered to be the best. And so it's like, it does seem like it's like, oh, it's just like a bunch of chateaus moved in and then they said, they all got together and were like, we're the best, and we made this list. But if you look at where those appellations, like where those chateaus are actually located, there is a terroir there. There is, it didn't just happen by accident. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does, absolutely. And I think it's, for people who are interested in wine, it's a question that everyone has to ask themselves.
I also say this, like, I think this is true for, most winemaker driven wines. And I think Bordeaux is definitely a winemaker driven wine. And I think Burgundy is too. Like they still put Burgundy in barrels. Like there's a lot of decisions that have to get made when you decide what you're going to do with, wines from the Côte de Beaune versus wines from the Côte de Nuit. Like, these are all things that winemakers have to think about. If somebody has a lot of money to invest in hiring the best winemaker, getting barrels from the best cooperage, investing in the best temperature controlled tanks, all of this, they're probably going to have a good wine. And so those chateaus in the 1855 classification made a lot of money early on because they were classified, and then use that money to just reinvest in their wineries. So you kind of get good wine no matter what. Yeah.
Well,
yeah. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah, it's really cool. That was a neat wine. It has such, it just drinks really well. And I think, it's $120 a bottle. There's no sort of going around that. But I do think it has, it is a special wine. Like, I think there are definitely occasions where pulling this wine out, in spending this money on a bottle of wine for a special occasion is well worth it. Why? Because Bordeaux equals red wine. Like you really can't, if we met aliens today and they said, what is red wine? Like, what is this red wine you're talking about? You would probably hand them a Bordeaux because nothing sort of typifies a red wine red wine and Bordeaux are kind of the same thing because a long time that's what red wine was. Red wine was Bordeaux. It, in maybe
100%.
if you were a few kilometers away from Burgundy, you would have a different meaning. But essentially around the world, people equated red wine with Bordeaux.
On Star Trek, literally all the time, whenever they drink wine from the replicator, nonetheless, it's always Bordeaux. Always. Probably another reason why.
I gotta look on YouTube for like a super cut of the sommelier's choice of Star Trek. So, that has that's another way to appeal. It's a wine that everyone will kind of drink. And that's when you surround yourself with, and your friends are all wine people, that is a hard task to necessarily do, not everyone's always curious about wine that you have, and everyone will drink anything that's put in front of them. But to provide a wine that people just salivate over and just have a visceral, enjoyable experience, you don't often think about it, but you really can't go wrong with Bordeaux.
Yeah, and I mean, these wines are visceral. I can still they last so long. There's so many things to smell. It's I think we haven't really talked about what they actually taste like, but it's the fruit is there. There's so much earth. There's so much mushroom. There's so much woodiness, spice, leather, tobacco. They taste there's just yeah, there's so many.
They figured out how to layer as much complexity into this wine as possible.
Yeah, exactly. They're just it's just and then another, and then another, and then another, and then another. And then if you guys leave these wines for an hour after this session and you go back to them in an hour, you're going to be oh my God, it's changed completely. Because then that's why you would decant. That's why people decant these wines. But yeah.
Wine number 3, let's do it.
Wine number 3 is one of my faves. I love it. This is the Chateau Prieuré-le-Chine. This one is from Margaux. So Margaux, the most famous, the most, I feel everybody knows.
The darling child of the Haute Medoc.
Yeah, I feel everybody, it's so part of the popular consciousness. It's you can say Margaux and people are oh, I think that's the name of a wine. Even if they don't really drink wine, it's the most famous first growth of all the first growths is in Margaux. It's called Chateau Margaux. It's very, very, very expensive. But this is a 4th growth. It's a 4th growth in its own right. This is the first label of a 4th growth. It's a 2009.
Yeah, so we got, over a decade of age on this one.
Yeah, and I think which going back to, that romance of Bordeaux, it's well, what was I doing in 2009? What was, there's somebody named Rachel, that's not me, commenting. I don't know who the other Rachel is, but I'm it is delicious. That is something I would say. But it's, yeah, this one is only 50% Cabernet Sauvignon. It's 45 Merlot and 5% Petit Verdot.
That's great.
So the Merlot is the roundness, and this is where you can kind of see it's has enough age that you can kind of see those layers start to really peel away, and it's it's so floral, it's so green, it's stewed green peppers and violets, but it's also smoky, but it's also meaty, but it's also kind of like ketchup chips in a weird way. I don't know.
Nah, I agree. There's a lot of things going on here and a lot of flavors, and you kind of want to it's like having a scotch. You kind of want to put a little water in it just to let it open up a little and let
these are concentrated.
Give yourself the ability to pull everything apart.
So it's 14% alcohol. That so it's not even it's high for sure, but it's not that high. But it's got that it's just so many layers. I just think this wine is so good. And, it's like, you can think back to like what you were doing. What was I doing in 2009? What were you doing in 2009? It's like this little time capsule. It's like, you can drink it and be like, wow, like, who was I then? Who am I now? That's yeah, just sitting around my house and quarantine, waxing on, waxing romantic about wine. But
I think this is a good time to talk about sort of labels in that a chateau, like a wine label, may not necessarily have its growth on there. And I think if you are someone who wants to, treat yourself and have a nice bottle of wine, it is sometimes like you have to be able to separate and identify the marketing
Bordeaux is
label.
very bad for that because they've tried to like subdivide themselves so much that they've basically subdivided themselves out of anybody being able to buy their wines because everyone's too intimidated. Like,
I think wine number 3 has like Grand Vin of Bordeaux or something on there.
Yeah, it says
not literally nothing.
This one doesn't even say that it's part of the 1855 classification on it, even though I know that it is. Weird.
Very strange. But that does happen, and it doesn't tell you that, it's a second label of another, and that can be tricky. So my advice is, well, you just have to kind of know. And like, if you're going to buy Bordeaux, perhaps and the LCBO is probably the best place to buy Bordeaux in Ontario.
Unless you private order.
Unless you can go, that said, I challenge everyone to go to Grape Witches tomorrow and just like look on their shelves and just ask them if they have any Bordeaux. But the point being is like, that also lends you an ability to do like some research online and look through the LCBO inventory to see, okay, I want Bordeaux. I like Margaux. So type in Margaux and then find it and then see the price ranges that you want, look up the chateau names.
I think
Margaux,
in my opinion, actually has the best value because it's the largest of the sub appellations, of the like sub AOPs of Bordeaux. And even though Margaux is the village, it has like swallowed up the 4 other villages around it. So you can actually find very affordable Margaux. Like, we have the Chateau Aimé in the shop for $30, and that one is from Margaux. Like that's straight up from the appellation Margaux, but it's $30. So it's like, Margaux has the best, like, you would never find a $30 Pauillac. Like, it's just not going to happen. But you can find a $30 Margaux if you want.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think that's cool. You kind of, it's very easy to glaze over when you're in the LCBO and you go to the Bordeaux section. You're like, I don't even want to try. I don't even want to think about it. I'm not looking for Bordeaux. I want to go to a cool region like Châteauneuf du Pape or
Châteauneuf du Pape. I'm just joking.
It's just the first thing that came into my mind. I don't know. But that's the point. There are, like I said, there are times when you could have this. The price of this wine was about, all the last 3 were all around about $130.
I think this one's 120 something. This is the only wine of this lineup I've actually bought for myself. It was like my fancy, like, I drank this at New Year's and was like, it was 2020, whatever, and like drank a bottle of this and had a nice.
Kieran asked the question about Brettanomyces.
Brettanomyces.
Does it play a role in Bordeaux?
Oh, I think that's a really, like, there is Brett in Bordeaux. But again, I think it's like a very, like, Bordeaux is very clinical, but in a good way, I think. And you know, places where you get rampant Brett are because there's an infection in the winery. And it's like you're always going to get a little bit of Brett with certain kinds of grapes, from what I understand. But Merlot, but like Bordeaux does a very good job of mitigating it, is sort of how I understand it. Same as Chateauneuf de Pape. You're always going to get a little bit of Brett, but it's never going to be like an overwhelming feature. Or the same as like Brunello de Montalcino. You're always going to get a little bit of VA, but it's never going to be an overwhelmingly defining feature. That's an awesome question. I really don't like Brett. I'm very like sensitive to Brett on the palate, but I do love Bordeaux and I do love Rioja. And those are like, tend to be wines that like naturally have some Brett. Yeah, I have feelings about Brett. I don't know if now is the time to air them all.
No, it's not.
They're there
100%
though.
correct.
They're there.
Incorrect. Chris and Paul asked about, I mean, you've lived in Montreal, like, is Bordeaux more prevalent there? Is that something that Quebecois
Yes,
people?
so 100%. Yeah, the French, how shall I say, drink better wines than us. They just do. They've just got better taste. It's like it's a thing. They drink like you can go into the SAQ and there's like a whole wall of wines from the Jura. And then you go into the LCBO and you're like, do you have any like Jura wines here? And the guy's like, jury, you're getting judged by a jury. And you're like, you know what, like whatever. Like they just like the education, and it's so, the wine culture is so much better in Quebec. And well, just in like French speaking places, I think in general, but there's definitely when I first moved here, I went to the LCBO and I was floored by how much New World wine was there. And when you go to Montreal, you go to the SAQ and it's all old world wine because just the palates are different. People will pretend that they don't like a little bit of sweetness here, but people really do like a little bit of sweetness in their wine in Ontario. It's, I think, because we're just a younger wine culture here, if that makes sense.
Well, we're changing it. One wine coach at a time.
One wine coach at a time. One Bordeaux session at a time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, who cares? Who cares that the SFU is better than the LCBO? Who cares that Quebec?
No, it's different. It's different because the wine culture is different. It's a bistro culture there. It's like more of a cafe culture there. You know, that said, I moved here specifically to become a sommelier because, I speak French, but I'm not Francophone. So I wasn't really invited to the table in Montreal. And that's like, it's a whole.
Classist.
Yeah. Let's do wine number 4.
And then the lesson is that no wine environment is perfect. They all have their ups and downs, their positives and negatives,
Except for Peter Pan, perfect wine culture, obviously.
Exactly. Okay, wine number 4, 2009 Reserve de la Comtesse.
Yeah, so this is a second label. This is the second label of the longest named chateau in Bordeaux. It's the Pichon Longueville Comtesse de Lalande. And this is the Reserve de la Comtesse. So this is like, she's like.
I remember having to learn, I do remember having to memorize that chateau in my younger, more ambitious days.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of the ones I always remember as being a third growth. Is it a third growth? Yeah, it's a third growth. Because when I do my like crazy study routine and I write out the 1855 classification, I'm always like, God, this thing and then get very annoyed. But this is from Pauillac. So this is the last of the 4 big appellations of the Médoc. And Pauillac is considered to be the best growing spot for Cabernet Sauvignon. It has the deepest gravel soils and the deepest croups. And it's,
I couldn't correct you. I hadn't heard that word until you said it about 25 minutes ago. So just lead with it.
Yeah, it's the croups are deep. And so this one is, there's so much gravel, less clay. Merlot likes to grow on clay. Cabernet Sauvignon likes to grow on gravel. And this Pauillac is considered to be sort of the longest lived of all the chateaus in Bordeaux. The Pauillac wines are considered to be sort of
so delicious.
The most full-bodied, the richest, the ones that can age the most powerful, the ones that can age the longest. So this Pauillac is the appellation with the most first growths. They have 3 out of the 5 first growths. And, the Rothschilds are there. It's big money country. But these wines are built to last, basically. Yeah, like there's no, you try it and you're like, oh yeah, like this is also, so the last wine we had, the Prieuré Lachine, was a 2009. Wine 3 is a 2009, and this is also a 2009. And I think if you compare them and you see where they are in their development, this wine to me is more reminiscent of wine 1, which we were like, oh, it's like tight and it needs some more time. Whereas like, the Prieuré Lachine is so open and it's so lifted and you get all those layers. This one, you're like, oh, like this can go like this. I would love to drink this again in 10 years and just see what's up with that. So
it's great. It's also like a little bit more elegant, like it's coming on this elegant route where it's like it's smooth and you're on this really like easy kind of roller coaster, like the roller coaster like your parents will go on because they're too scared to go on the big ones. Just it's very fun. This is a delicious one.
But the tannins are there, like I can feel them like under my tongue or on the roof of my mouth, touching my tongue. It's like, yeah, and they're big and they're like kind of aggressive. I'm like, whew, this wine is in my mouth. It's like, it's intense.
That's cool. What was your favorite, Rach, of all of the wines?
Oh, that's such a good question. I really like this one because I think this one, to me, wine number 4 has the most potential for development. Like this wine is really has a long way, like has come a long way, I'm assuming. I haven't tried it before today, but I can only assume that if you drank this, 8 years ago, you would have been like, oh my God, my mouth. Like it would have been like a lot to deal with. But I can see the future in it too. Like I can see that this wine is going to be drinking beautifully in 10 more years. Yeah. That said, I think the Prieuré Lachine has like a pretty special place in my heart. It's just so like open and elegant, and it's so earthy and so rich, and you can really taste the integration of all its components are coming together really nicely. So yeah, wine 3 and wine 4 for different reasons.
And before we kind of like round out the hour, I think we kind of skipped over a point that I think it's worth making clear, that these are wines that we just bought off a list. Like we didn't age these wines for 10 years. They weren't sitting in the Peter Pan cellar. So like just because this has been aged for, how many years? 13 years. It's still available to be bought now, which cannot not necessarily be said for any other region. And I think Bordeaux does it the best in terms of access to older vintages. So you're getting wines at their peak rather than having to like you just have to buy the current release and just deal with it, aka Burgundy. And I think that's kind of worth exploring as well. It's that like that's another way that Bordeaux is a little bit more accessible and a little bit more relevant, because you are having older vintages and developed wine, which is unheard of kind of everywhere else. You don't have access to developed wine the way you do in Bordeaux, you know?
Yeah, and I think too with like, a lot of people don't like, Bordeaux doesn't do a very good job at advertising themselves. They're not like, hey, we have all these second labels, we've got all these third labels. It's like, it's not, they're not necessarily making it easy for people to know that these are good wines. And there are third labels that come through the LCBO every year that are like $50-$60 and that drink really, really well and that are really delicious. And there are, sub appellations of the right bank like Fransac that come out the gate at $30 or $40 and are really delicious. Like the accessibility is there. They just are very bad letting people know that it's there, whereas like, I think
it's not cool. Like Bordeaux isn't cool, and it will struggle to be cool for like, you'll need a cooler person than me to make Bordeaux cool.
Bordeaux was cool, and then it really suffered from the like the Parkerism, the point system of like the late 90s, early 2000s. They really used that to elevate their top wines at the expense of their second and third labels. Because they were like, oh, the Chateau Margaux got 98 points and we're going to sell it for $3,000 a bottle. And it's like, yeah, that's great. But like, that's not really that's really not your bread and butter, So your bread and butter is like $20, $30 wines. The wines that people actually.
And it's predictable and it's very classic. It's very hard to not have a Bordeaux from entry level, from the right bank, the left bank, that isn't going to sort of generally taste the same in the glass. So, wrapping this up, will I drink more Bordeaux? No, but will I treat myself with a nice bottle of Bordeaux? At a fancy steakhouse, it's like, I keep talking about like restaurants and dinner parties as if that's kind of like, I don't even know what that is anymore, but like those are those kind of occasions. So I think I will 100% choose Bordeaux, drink probably more Bordeaux this year than I'll ever have because of this class and like
I think it's yeah, I mean, I've drank more Burgundy this year than I ever have, just by proxy of you, Nick, really, because to me,
do not lump me in with the Burgundy hounds. Oh no, they're the worst.
But the way a lot of people feel about Bordeaux is the way I always sort of felt about Burgundy. I came at it from a study angle where I was like, oh, memorize the villages of the Côte de Nuit and know the good producers, and that's it. And I was like, yeah, it's fine. It's a wine for rich people that you can age or not age, whatever. And I kind of lumped it into this thing. And I think that's sort of where Bordeaux fits for most people, because it's not considered to be a cool wine. It's not considered to be like a hip wine, but if you like reminiscing about history and thinking about the nature of time, then it's the coolest wine. Obviously.
Yeah, but and also like sell your Burgundy, just buy old Bordeaux. Like you don't have to sell a Bordeaux. I don't think, in the world of limited cellar space, if you sell a wine at all, my hot tip is don't waste that space and your money cellaring Bordeaux unless you've got, decades ready. Because we have access to it,
Yeah.
at the LCBO, every classics release has Bordeaux. Every classics release has Old Bordeaux. You can find it in your vintages. Like, it's gonna drink like old wine. Old Bordeaux is gonna drink beautifully.
Yeah, I mean, Catherine, the agent who sold us most of these wines, always has Old Bordeaux in her portfolio. Always. Yeah.
Exactly. And there are like the intricacies of the wine industry allow, without going into too much detail, allow us to, it is much more easy to grab your hands on great Old Bordeaux than it is to get to go like in any other wine region. So, I definitely have some things planned for later in the year with Bordeaux, and like bringing some cool stuff into the store and some cool activities associated with that. And I think this is like, it's never going to hold its place as Austria has in my heart, but I am and I hope everyone else is too, is like a little bit more open to drinking some Bordeaux and like, I don't know, sharing it and having fun with it, because fun and Bordeaux definitely do not have never linked in people's minds. But please, everyone, tell me what everyone's favorite wine was.
Yeah, we want to know. I always want to know. You always hear me in the comments like, tell me what your favorite wine was now. Yeah, 3 and 4. I mean, number 3 is so open that you can't help but love number 3 because it's so, it's expressing the way it should at this minute, but that doesn't mean the other wines aren't expressing some way as well.
Absolutely. Before we leave, next wine coach isn't up yet because I'm being very lazy, but it's going to be Greek wine next week. Krista Oben and Emily McLean are joining me to have some fun with a lot.
Ladies are back.
Yeah. I mean, Krista's been to Greece, and to a lot of people, she's just a great witch, but she is, but she's also has a passion for Greek wine that we're really excited. I'm really excited for her, and you can't have Krista and me without Emily, because she's the fun and she's the meat in the sandwich. And then the following week, I've got a really special Burgundy, Pinot Noir tasting lined up that isn't necessarily like, we've gone through Pinot Noir. We just had one last week, but I've got 3 special producers lined up that I really want to taste side by side, that I've been wanting to taste side by side. One of them's Domaine Dujac. The other is By Far, which is my favorite winemaker in the whole world. And the other one is Kristen from Oregon, who are all these like masters of whole cluster, to just sort of see how 3 different parts of the world use whole cluster and use this style of Pinot Noir winemaking, and do a little comparison, because they all actually have very close ties to one another. They've all worked in each other's winemaking facilities, and I think there's a shared history to them, and I'm really excited to sort of see if it shows in the glass. And I have no idea, because I've actually I've tasted By Far, I've tasted Dujac, I've never tasted Kristen, but I've never tasted them side by side. So I'm super excited to do that. So I'll probably put that online tomorrow when I finally get back to work, and put everything up. But it should be super fun. Greek wine, I've got lots of Greek wine, and every time I forget about Greek wine, I taste one and I'm like, oh, this is these are really special wines that don't taste like anything else in the world, and just very approachable and very delicious and kind of great for summer. So I'm excited to have a little Greek jaunt. Okay, Rachel, lovely to have you here. Finally visible, finally being seen and heard by the audience. Next week you will be back to being the secret som. Thanks to Ashley, one of the soms on our team who was secret som tonight.
I forgot to introduce you, Ash. Sorry.
Actually, Ash has been on. She was here for Scott. She's been seen.
She's drinking
almost every som
downstairs
has been seen. All 6 of us. So, but everyone have a lovely night. I'll see everyone next week. Hopefully, come into the store if you have any questions. Rachel's been doing some great blind wine flights for people in little pouches. So if anyone wants to have fun with blind tasting, you don't have to be studying. You could just want to have a really cool blind wine experience, because it's, I mean, what else have we got to do in lockdown? You know,
Nothing.
blind wine Monday or something. I don't know. I'm just making that up. But everyone have a lovely evening. Rach, thank you again. I hope you had fun. Thanks for sharing your passion and allowing me not to essentially say anything. So I really appreciate it.
Oh, you mean I like to talk a lot? Oh, shocking.
But people didn't know. People don't know that. That's the. I mean, people do know that because we're all friends here and everyone's met you before.
Yeah, I mean, I have a whole podcast where I don't bring.
Oh yeah, podcast.
I'm just like, hey, listen to my voice, listen to me talk.
Rachel's podcast. It's called House Wine. It's a great listen when you're just like, you know, walking by yourself, walking the dog, catching public transport. It's just a really great way to like meditate on wine and just learn something without necessarily having to like study. So anyway.
My voice is also